So first what you're going to need to do to make this pie is you're going to obviously need to make the crust. So what you are going to do is you're going to get 1.5 cups of all-purpose flour, and you're going to pour it into your mixing bowl. You'll just need a medium mixing bowl to do this. And then what you're going to do is you're going to add in a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Now you're just going to quickly mix that around a little bit. It doesn't need to be mixed too well. And then after you mix that in, what you're going to do is you're going to get a 1/2 cup of Crisco. And you will just scoop that in with your flour, which is easier said than done, I guess. It wants to stick to my measuring cup right now. Okay, now once you have that out, what you're going to do is you're just going to mix it up well. The nice thing about using Crisco is that it is a solid at room temperature, whereas butter starts getting really soft at room temperature, as you probably know. So Crisco makes this a ton easier than if you were to use butter. But if you prefer that butter flavor, you can of course use butter. Just realize that you are going to potentially have a little bit of trouble with that as you're mixing the dough, because it will want to get really soft at room temperature. Okay, now when you're getting to this point, you're probably ready to move on. You just want to make sure that you don't have any chunks of Crisco in here, much bigger than like the size of a kernel of corn or a pea or any of those small items that you can compare it to. Once you have it like that, you are ready to move on to the next step. Okay, the next stage is probably the hardest stage of making this. You're going to need to get a measuring cup, and you will need 1/3 cup of water in here. So you're going to need to use around 1/4 cup to the full 1/3 cup of this water. What you're going to do is you are going to just put in about 1 to 2 tablespoons at a time, preferably 1 tablespoon at a time, because you'll get a more accurate amount. Because if you do it 1 tablespoon at a time, you're more likely to get the pastry dough perfect. So what you're going to do is you're just going to put in about 1 tablespoon. You can get a measuring tablespoon to do this if you wish, if you think that that would be easier. And you're just going to mix that in until it's pretty well mixed. And you're going to get some of the dry stuff more into the middle. And then again, you're just going to put in about 1 tablespoon. And you're just going to continue this process until your pastry dough is the right consistency. But it is very important that you mix it thoroughly, because you don't want a really moist piece of dough in here. You want to make sure that you have it as well mixed as you possibly can. What you're looking for is you're looking for the dough to stick together, but you're not wanting it to be too moist, but you're also wanting to make sure that it is going to stick together, because what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to roll this out into a circle in order to get it into the pie pan. So that's why you're just doing this. Like, you can see that mine's not really wanting to hold together still wanting to break off into clumps. So that means I need more water still. So right now I'm probably at 1/4 cup of water that I have added in, and it's looking pretty decent. I'm still having a few little dry clumps to the side, but I'm going to, as I said before, I'm going to mix it up very thoroughly before I decide if I need to add a little more water in. From what I'm seeing right now, it is very close, because the last step of mixing your dough is you're going to mix it with your hand quickly, and it is looking like it should stick together pretty well. But what I'm going to do is I feel like it's just going to need a half tablespoon of water just to make it that perfect consistency that I'm looking for. But since it is now clumping together, it's going to be a little harder or more difficult to make sure that's thoroughly mixed all together. But as you can see, generally speaking, it is wanting to clump together. So that is a good sign. Now what you're going to do is you're going to want to wash your hands if they're not already clean. Mine are clean, but I'm still wanting to make sure that they're really clean because it is the COVID-19 pandemic right now. So even though it's just my family and I that are going to be eating this, I still feel like I should wash my hands regularly. Now that my hands are clean, what I'm going to do is I'm going to knead this with my hand. And I'm going to make sure that all the dough is wanting to stick together as I do so, or at least the majority. Because if it's not going to stick together as you're kneading it, it's not going to stick together as you're rolling it out to make it into the right size to go into your pie pan. Now currently I'm looking at it as I'm kneading it, and if you can see, it is kind of wanting to split a bit. You can see right here that when I squeeze it, it cracked open. So that is a sign that it just needs a tiny bit more water. Not a lot, but just a tiny bit more. So again, I'm going to be a chicken and add in just about half a tablespoon of water, and I'm just going to continue kneading it by hand, and I'm going to see if that is a better consistency now with a tiny bit more water. But what you're going to do is you're going to have to kind of split your dough open a bit so that you can get that liquid, or so that you can get that water in thoroughly mixed in with your dough. And once you have it the right consistency, you should probably knead it for about 5 minutes-ish. It's up to you, really, but the more you knead it, the more fully mixed it'll be. Okay, so now I'm looking at it. It feels about right. I'm squeezing it, and it is breaking up, but it's not falling apart. I'm not breaking it, and it's not crumbling into the bowl. So that is about the right consistency to start forming it into the shape it needs to be for the pie pan. Okay, next what you're going to do is you're going to take some flour, probably about 2 or 3 tablespoons of flour, and what you're going to do is you're just going to make a nice area. Make sure that it's over 12 inches wide, and what you're going to do is you're going to flour it. Now what you're going to do, you're just going to swipe the excess flour to the side. You might need that later. And now you have a nicely floured spot. It's a little hard for me to do this with my tripod right now. I need to fix something on my tripod so I can lift it up a little higher. I busted a piece. So what you're going to do is you're just going to put your dough in the middle. It doesn't look like it's in the middle on the camera, but trust me, it is. And what you're going to do is you're just going to slowly start rolling it out, okay? You're going to notice that the sides are not looking nice, but they will by the end. Now what you're going to notice is it's starting to stick to my rolling pin, which I was hoping it wouldn't. Looks like it is. So you're just going to take some of that flour from before, and you're going to flour your rolling pin. And then it shouldn't want to stick as much. Now if you're having any cracks in your dough, you can just kind of roll over that in that specific direction, and you can see that it's already starting to stick to my rolling pin again. So that's why I told you to have the excess flour there, so you can just continually be adding more flour onto your rolling pin so it won't stick. I've heard some people say that rolling pins that are made out of quartz or marble are better at not sticking. I have not found that either or is better, truly. So I'm just using one that's actually made out of plastic. I have a plastic one and I have a wood one, and I find both of them work fine, I guess. Basically what you're looking for is you're looking for it to be big enough to go onto your pan. So just keep doing that. Once in a while you can grab your pan and you can place it over your dough. Now what you're going to be wanting, let me see if I can just move this momentarily without making a disaster. You're wanting about 2 inches on every side of the pan extra of dough, because of course the dough is going to have to bend into your pan. So you can see I don't have that yet, and that means that I'm going to have to keep rolling it. And I'm going to check if it looks like it's going to be good for my pan. So right there, yeah, for the most part that looks like it's going to be good. I can probably make that work. I might just try to fill in a few spots, but overall I think that's going to be good. But as I said, I'm just going to try to fix up a few spots, maybe make it a little bigger to certain regions. Now what you're going to do is you're going to take some of that flour that I told you to save from earlier, and you're just going to sprinkle that over the dough a bit. Because what we're going to do now is we're actually going to be folding this over onto itself, which means you do not want it to be sticking to itself, because of course that would mean that you'd have to be rolling it up all over again, which would be terrible. Now what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to have a spatula / flipper, and I personally recommend that you just dip it into your flour container so that there's a little bit of flour on it. Now what you're going to do is very, very carefully, you're just going to go all the way around your dough, and you're going to get it so that it's not attached to your counter anymore. Even though that you put flour down, it's still going to want to attach itself to your counter. Now you can probably see the color change that is occurring. You got the dark stuff here, the light stuff here, which shows that this is now not attached to your counter, which is what you're wanting to see. So as I said, you're just going to make your way around the pastry dough, continually making sure that you're trying not to break the dough. That is a heck of a lot easier said than done, but it is possible if you go nice and slow, and you're just waiting for that moment that you no longer see any of that dark shade under there, which I think is right now for myself. Okay, I know I have a flimsy spot right here in my dough, so I'm going to start on the opposite side of that, and using my hands and my flipper as well as I can, I'm just going to take that, I'm going to flip it over like so. So now what you're going to do is you're just going to take that again, and you're just going to flip it. Now you're going to take your pan, and you're going to get your grease, whatever type you want. I'm personally going to just be using some Crisco, and You're going to take that and you're just going to grease the pan a little bit. And just make sure that everywhere that the dough is going to be touching is nicely greased. Because that way when it comes to serving it out of your dish, it's not going to stick and life is going to be good. It'd be terrible to have a beautiful pie and have it just crumble and not want to come out of the pan the minute that you're trying to serve it for your guests. So now that that is nicely greased, you're going to try your best to get this sucker up into there in one piece. And you're going to try to put it in the quarter mark, so it's just covering a quarter of the pan. And then you're going to do the painful process of trying to unflip this sucker out, which you can see that my busted piece did not want to cooperate with me here. But either way, we can deal with that, as I said. So make sure that you're not having any folds in your dough or any cracks. Sadly, it looks like my dough did not want to work with me today, but we can deal with that easily. So if you have any cracks, any folds in your dough, all you have to do is smush it. It's just like you're using your pin again, and you're just gonna fill in those holes, okay? So now that it is covering the sheet nicely, you can just take your spatula / flipper, whichever one you prefer, and you can just go around the edges, and you're just going to knock off the excess dough that you have on your pie sheet or on your pie pan. And just make sure that you're putting your hand along the edge as you're doing that, so that you're not letting it mess up your dough that's in your pan. Okay, so now you can kind of just go around the edges, make sure that's still nice to look at, and then you can decide what sort of design you want. All that I ever do is I just take a fork and I go around the edges and just kind of smush it down and do that for a design. Okay, now that I've gone all the way around the edge like that, what you can do is you can just set this aside. Preferably you can set it in your fridge if you have room, but now you're ready to start working on the filling. Okay, now what you're going to do is you're going to get 1 tablespoon of melted margarine, then 1.5 tablespoons of granulated sugar, and lastly you're going to add about half a tablespoon of cinnamon. And once you have that, you're just going to mix that up like so, and then you will grab your pie crust and you're just going to dump that in. And with that dumped in there, all you're going to do is you're going to take a brush and you're going to spread that mixture all around the bottom of your crust. Now what you're going to make sure is you're going to make sure that you don't get it on the edges, because if you put it on the edges, that sugar will likely burn and it will not taste as good. So just make sure that you have it on the inside where you will have filling. As you can see, that is nicely mixed in, so again, you can just put that back in your fridge if you have room. What you're going to want to do before you do anything else is you're going to want to preheat your oven to 350 Fahrenheit so it can get up to temperature before it is time to throw this pie into the oven. Okay, now to make the filling for the pie, you're going to have a 1/4 cup of melted margarine, then 1/2 cup of granulated sugar. Then you will add a 1/4 cup of powdered sugar. Then you will add 1 teaspoon of baking powder. And lastly, you will add 1/8 of a teaspoon of salt. That's not all that goes into the filling, but right now what you're going to do is you're going to mix this well. And lastly, for the filling, you're going to add 1 1/4 cups of flour. Then you're going to add 1 egg. And then you're going to have to mix this up well. And finally, the last ingredient for the filling is a 1/2 cup of milk. Then you're going to finally mix all of this up well. Okay, now that the batter is mixed well, you're going to want a spatula and your pie crust. Now what you're going to do is you're going to take your spatula and you're going to scrape your filling out of the mixing bowl into your pie crust. Just make sure that you get it all out of your mixing bowl. Once you have that all out, what you're going to do is you're going to just move it around so it's even throughout your crust. And it might not look like there is sufficient filling right now, but you have to remember that this is basically a giant cookie that you're placing into your pie crust. So it's going to rise a lot thanks to that baking powder. So you're just going to move it around like so. Then we have one last thing to put in this before it is done and ready to go into the oven. Now what you're going to do is you're going to put a 1/4 cup of granulated sugar into a bowl. Then you're going to take a teaspoon of cinnamon. And I don't normally mix with a measuring spoon, but whatever, I'm sick of making dirty dishes. But you're just going to mix that up in your bowl. And then what you're going to do is you're just going to spread it over the top of the filling that you put in. Just spread it somewhat evenly, it doesn't have to be perfect. You're just going to sprinkle that around. And what that'll do is it'll slightly caramelize as you're baking the pie. And now that is ready to go into the oven. One thing that I almost forgot to say is what you can do is you can line the top part of the crust with tin foil, and that will make it so that it doesn't get too brown. Now, if you're not like me and you're not a poor student that's trying to scrimp and save, especially during this COVID-19 pandemic, what you can actually do is you can actually buy these things that go over the pie crust just along the edges at the store, and that way you don't have to use tin foil, and that way it won't become overly brown. So now what you can do, since the oven is up to temperature, is you can take your pie, and what you'll do is you'll put it in there for 20 minutes to start, and once 20 minutes is up, you will be taking off that tin foil in order to let the crust brown for a certain amount of time. Okay, it's been 20 minutes, so now I have removed the tin foil from the edges of the pie pan. And now we're going to set the timer for 25 more minutes. And at about 20 minutes, what I'm going to do is I'm going to test the center of the pie with a toothpick. And what you're looking for is you're looking for the toothpick to come out clean. So now we're just going to wait for about 20 minutes before we test it for the first time. Okay, I checked at 20 minutes, but a toothpick did not come out clean. But now it's been 25 minutes, and I just stuck this toothpick in there, and let's see if I can get it to focus on the toothpick. And it came out clean. So now all you need to do is to let it cool off, and then it'll be ready to eat. It is preferable that you do serve it with some sort of ice cream, preferably vanilla, but you can do it your way. You can just have it without anything at all. Maybe you want some whipped cream with it or something else. But either way, that is how you make a snickerdoodle pie. Remember to subscribe to my channel, just hit the link below, and then you'll know whenever I have a new video up. And you can follow me on Instagram and Facebook to keep up with my channel on those social media platforms also. And I hope that you have a good day.